Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. So, I am creating this video so that you have a better understanding of how to use a Grammarly report when you receive it for any type of writing. Now, it is important that you use the Grammarly report and not just the Grammarly extension, because the Grammarly extension will only allow you to fix the errors that it tells you according to the free platform. However, the Grammarly report comes from our premium account, so you are able to access just a lot more corrections, and just it teaches you a lot more things. So please do not ignore your Grammarly report. Now, when you pull up your Grammarly report, it's going to look like this. There's going to be a lot of different data, general metrics. Those aren't too important. Now, the score is up to 100. The higher the score means less mistakes. Don't worry too much about that, because we all make mistakes. Now, the plagiarism is very important. You are going to want to try to get your plagiarism down to 0. Now, you can see in this report, it's indicating that 5% of the entire document is actually plagiarized, which means it's either incorrectly cited, or the paraphrase was not done in a good enough way to make it in your own words. And if it's able to detect that when you paraphrase that it's from somewhere else on the internet, then that means you did not paraphrase well enough. Your paraphrase should not be detected as plagiarism. Now, sometimes it will still detect plagiarism within a quote, and that will be because you either changed the quote a little bit, or you didn't cite the quote correctly. Because if you did everything correct, then it should not come up as plagiarism. Now, 17 sources does not mean that she used 17 sources. This means that these are 17 different sources were identified as plagiarism. Okay, so she might have used 30 sources, which is way too many sources, but she might have used 30, but 17 of those came back as plagiarized. Okay, so those are important. Writing issues, you guys can easily align these with maybe your IXL. So you can see here this student misspelled a lot of words and had issues with punctuation in compound and complex sentences, even with text inconsistencies and determiners. So I would recommend that you go and do IXLs on, articles about punctuation, about compound and complex sentences, to get better at those skills. Now, there's a few different other categories to look at here. We have correctness, we have clarity, we have engagement, we have delivery. Okay, and that's how Grammarly kind of groups up your mistakes. And we'll see those later. It's good to use unique and rare words. You should have higher scores here. All right. All right. Getting into the paper. Now, you'll want to kind of have a side-by-side like this, as you see on the screen. Here's the paper that you can edit on this side on the left, and here's the Grammarly report. Each error, you can see October 20th is underlined with red line. That means it's a critical error. It means it's very important. All the other colors are more kind of stylistic suggestions and whatnot. So you can see here that the number 1 and the number 3 are critical errors, whereas this number 2 is something else. Now, you might be wondering what these numbers are and how they can help you. When you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your Grammarly report, you see there's a lot of errors here. Get past the works cited page. You'll find that each of those numbers correspond. You see number 1, October 20th. All right, so there's apparently text inconsistencies. So that number 2 that was not underlined in red is a hard to read text, which means it might be grammatically correct, but it's difficult for the reader to understand. So you're going to want to take a look at that and think of a way that you can either rewrite it or break it down. It doesn't give you a suggestion on what to change. It just tells you that you need to change it. So that's where you need to apply your own brain and break this down. So if we read this, in a 2016 interview with National Public Radio, NPR, a radio network based in Washington, D.C., a female Rwandan parliament mentioned that her husband expected her to make sure his shoes were polished, the water was put in the bathroom for him, and the clothes were ironed. So that is a bit of a long text. I would think of a way to maybe this first bit of information to break that down, maybe in 2 separate sentences, but more or less, it is a little bit long. So let's break that down into maybe 2 sentences. All right. So you scroll down, you see some different types of suggestions that they give you. Text inconsistencies. Those are often have to do with pronouns, either there's inconsistencies in it either being singular or plural, or maybe even unclear about which pronoun or which transition it is transitioning to or from. So you might be completely fine on that. You just want to double check to make sure that everything makes sense. And so every time that we see a 3 throughout the paper, that's what it'll look like. Now, sometimes they just tell you to delete things, like 2 was a result of, right? And most of the times, those are good suggestions. You'll want to make those changes, okay? Was a result of versus resulted from. Resulted from is much more simple. It's much more direct. It's not written in passive voice, but more active. So those are the kind of changes that you want to make. You'll see that sometimes there's punctuation suggestions. Maybe you needed to delete or add a comma. All right. A lot of times you'll just have wordy or unclear sentences, and it's important to look at what Grammarly is trying to make you change it to, but not just blindly change it, right? Maybe they're telling me that genuinely is a better word to use than truly. I might go back to number 9 in my paper and find, no, actually, I like truly better. And that's fine. You can keep it the way it is. This is just a suggestion. Okay. Here's another one, major to significant. Major might be a completely fine word there, but significant might be a better. You just have to use your own intuition to make that decision. As you scroll, you see there's just more of these kind of unclear sentences, unclear sentence, unclear sentence, unclear sentence. This is a very common thing. Unclear paragraph, misspelled words, intricate text. And anytime it says intricate text with the word this, then maybe it's not clear what this is referring to. So you maybe want to replace that with a more specific noun. So as we scroll, you'll see all the different errors. And like I said, each of those errors corresponds to the number. So let's go back up to our page. And there's a lot here. I think there's over 100. So you're going to have to look at every single one of those in isolation to make sure that it all looks good. Now, the second most important thing is plagiarism. This is very important that we get rid of all the plagiarism. You can tell that they're telling you to look at plagiarized text by this vertical line. Most of the time it's kind of a blue color, okay? And you can see that that is here. She mentioned the source, Warner. However, it may not be paraphrased good enough. And that's where we have to decide, do I just want to make this a direct quote or do I want to make it a paraphrase? This is an apostrophe. That is not a quote. So if the author meant to make this a direct quote, they need to make a quote here and a quote here with Warner, and it'll be fine. Okay. So this is very unclear. I'm confused what's happening. Is it a paraphrase? Is it a quote? And that's why Grammarly called this plagiarism. So you're going to want to go back to the original source, and Grammarly makes it very easy to do that. So 158, I'm going to scroll back, and you see here 160, there's some more plagiarized text. Continuing to scroll, 161, continuing to scroll. Most of these sources don't indicate plagiarism, so that's good, but a few of them do. Here's another one. You're going to want to check that one. Here's another one, 163, these 2 lines. You're going to want to check that out. Continuing to scroll, grassroots movements, all right, that doesn't look like it's a quote, so it's probably, I didn't paraphrase well enough, so I'm going to want to change that as well. This one as well, I want to check what's wrong with that. Continuing to scroll, there's another one right here, okay. Continuing to scroll, and there's a lot, you see there's more and more. Okay, so I want to go to that first one. I think it was 158, okay. And there it is, 158. His shoes were polished. The water was put in the bathroom for him. So I wrote this maybe a month ago, so I'm like, I can't remember if I was supposed to make this a quote or if I was supposed to paraphrase it. Well, they put the link right there for you to check. So you can just go ahead and click on that, and then you'll see the original website, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember this. Okay, yeah, I definitely plagiarized that. So I need to either go back and paraphrase better, or I want to just make it a quote. And let me try to find it. His shoes. There it was. His shoes were polished. The water was put in the bathroom His clothes were ironed already. So that is definitely plagiarism. All right. So you want to think of a different way to paraphrase this or put it in a quote. And it's as simple as that. So you'll want to go back to your original document. Here it is. Make sure her shoes were polished, and I want to revise that part to get rid of the plagiarism. All right. And you guys can see that there's a lot of different sources here and a lot of different places where plagiarism might have happened. So you're going to want to check that. Now, sometimes, like they found the COVID crisis had been an eye-opener for. That is certainly a very general, short statement that maybe someone else in the world could have written about. And you might have just had a coincidence and you would have written the same thing. And that's okay. That's not plagiarism. That's just, two great minds think alike. But just in case, I'm going to click on this to double check to make sure that I didn't get any information from this place. And if I didn't even use this source, I'm like, what the heck? I've never seen this in my life. Well, then it wasn't plagiarism. Okay. But it's good to check just to make sure. Alrighty. But most of the time, I think in other words, we need systems that provide See, that's a very generic kind of statement that anyone else could have come up with. That's probably not paraphrased. But the longer it is, then the odds are that it's probably plagiarized. Okay. Alrighty. So that's how you read a Grammarly report. Make sure that you go through every single error. Like I said, you might not make a change off the back of every single one. However, you need to at least think about it and decide if the suggestion or the correction that you're trying to make will make your paper a better paper. All right. And that is how you read and use a Grammarly report.